Alright guys, so here we are in Photoshop. So the very first thing I'd like to do in Photoshop, by the way, if Photoshop crashes or anything like that, is because this is the brand new version that I just installed on this laptop. It's the 2017 version. So, fair warning. Alright, so the very first thing I'd like to do basically is review the image and figure out what overall adjustments I would like to make to the image before I even start worrying about skin or anything like that. So here's what I would like to do. So the very first thing that I look at here with this image is, let me just get a brush here so I could diagram it for you guys. Let's get a nice little color here, red. Or that looks red enough. Okay, so the very first thing that I see in this image that I would like to fix is, whoops. Oh, that's why, because it's not full. Okay. All right, so the very first thing I'd like to do is I would like to fix her calves here. Okay, so what I need to do with that is I need to utilize the Liquify tool to make that work. Okay, so we're going to utilize the Liquify tool to basically fix that and make it a little bit more pleasing. And the reason for that is because I didn't notice, and this is probably why this image didn't make the cut, is because when I was capturing this image, I did not notice that this was happening at the time. I probably fixed it after the fact, but you know, when I captured this image, I didn't notice it. So this is what needs to be fixed here. Okay, now the other thing is I look at the rest of the image to see what else needs to be fixed, and I may fix her here, that's over here. I may add some hair back into that just to make sure that you can actually not see through it. The rest of these here over here, I may not touch it, but we'll see. But I may fix this one. Okay, so from an overall adjustment perspective, these are the things that I see that I would need to fix. Okay, so now let's fix the first thing, which is we need to basically liquefy her legs. So let's duplicate this this background image and let's start by liquefying her legs. Okay, so the way I will go about creating this duplicate layer is, one, you could just hit Command J. On a Mac, you could just hit Command J and it duplicates the background. Or you could basically create a new layer, okay, by clicking this button right here and then hitting Command Alt Shift E, right, and that basically duplicates the layer as well. All right, so that's a long way around doing it, but that's two different ways that you can actually do it. Okay, so let's begin with the Liquify. So go to Filter, and then you go to Liquify. Okay, so you basically want to liquefy before you you basically do anything. You want to liquefy first. Okay, so let's liquefy her legs. So basically I utilize this tool here, the forward warp tool, and that's pretty much the only tool that I utilize for the most part when I'm basically working with Liquify. Unless I need to freeze a particular area, then I would freeze that area. But I don't utilize Liquify that much. I try to get as much I can in camera correctly if possible. But if you can't, this tool might save you. So let's liquefy her leg here. Wow, that's really bad. All right, but let's fix it. Actually, this needs to be adjusted. I just realized that this needs to be adjusted. So let's all right, so before we start, you know, liquefying her leg, because this is brand new, some of these settings on this stuff is kind of off from what I would generally use. So on this tool, I need to adjust the pressure on this. I need to bring it down a little bit so it's not as sensitive. So let's begin to restructure her calf here. So the goal here is just to make it a little bit smaller and not as big as it was. And that's only because the leg behind her is just basically pushing this calf to be a little bit larger than it needs to. So we're gonna adjust this just a little bit here because that just looks a little bit weird. Okay. And you guys just have to be a little bit careful with this stuff because you don't want to you know, reshape someone or something into something that don't look realistic. Okay, so you just want to do small gentle movements. Okay, small movements. Okay, and you just have to keep in mind how a leg is shaped. You know, it gets narrow below. As you go down below, it gets narrower. Okay, so you just keep that in mind. Okay, so I think that looks relatively okay. Let me just adjust a little bit more. Push this down. Okay. All right, so let's close this out. I think that looks good to me, good enough. I mean, you could work on that a little bit more, make it look a little bit better. But for our purposes for now, this looks fine. As you can see, this was the before and this is the after. Okay, before, after. All right, so it looks much better and it's not as distracted. So that's very important. You don't want to distract away from your subject. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing now is we will look at the subject's face. Okay, so let's look at her face really quick and we try to figure out what is it that we need to adjust on her face, if anything. Okay, so we are lucky enough to be working with a model with fairly great skin here. So what do we need to fix? So the first thing that we need to fix here is these lines here. We need to fix those lines. We need to get rid of this. It seems to be some makeup that's there. This is debatable whether or not I'll remove that. Just need to touch some of that up a little bit. Okay. What else? What else? We could touch that up. We could touch that up. Touch that up just a little bit. Touch that up. And then we could touch this up. So those are the things that we could possibly do to basically get rid of some of the blemishes on her skin. Okay, so let's do that really quick. So we're gonna add another adjustment layer. Okay, and then we're gonna do the clone, actually the spot healing. Let's do spot healing. Okay, now spot healing is sometimes for me is like a hit or miss, but we'll see how it works out. If not, there's other tools that we could use like the clone stamp tool. Okay, so all you do is just basically draw on the affected area and Photoshop will do the rest. Okay, so far this tool seems to be working great. So we're gonna continue. Okay, so yeah, this is the most exciting part of this process, which is the retouching. I may fast forward this just so I don't bore you guys to hell with this part of the job here. But if I do switch a different tool, I'll stop the fast forward and I'll come back and I'll let you guys know why I'm switching tools and what I'm doing. Okay. Alright guys, so that was it. So let's take a quick look at the before and after on what I just did here with respect to all the the slight imperfections that I changed on her face. Okay, so let's look at the before, and this is the after. Before, after. So as you could tell, I didn't really do much with respect to her face, but that's pretty much it. Okay. So the other thing that I said I was going to try to do was to see what I could do with it here. So let's add another adjustment layer here really quick, and let's do the clone stamp tool. So basically the clone stamp tool will allow me to duplicate some aspect of it here, and then I could basically clone it in, if you would. So I'm gonna have to go on one of the layers that actually have, you know, the actual hair on it, because this layer doesn't even have anything on it, so I can't really duplicate anything on there. So I'll go to this layer, and then I go to copy. Well, I hit the Alt key, right? Let's see here, Alt. So I hold down on the Alt key, right? And as you can see, this layer has nothing, so it's not going to duplicate anything. So I go to the layer that has something, copy it by holding down on the Alt key and clicking on the part that I want to duplicate, and then I go back to this layer, and then I basically brush it in. So right now that looks horrible, but that is fine. We're gonna fix that in a minute, and I don't even think I need that much, but never hurt. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is hit Command T. So Command T basically will take what I just duplicated, and it will allow me to move it around. Okay, so I click on it, and I'll be able to move it around with Command T. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring down the opacity on this layer just a little bit. Okay, so that I could see, because my intent is to cover up this hole here. So just so I can see what's going on. So right now, it looks like this patch here is gonna cover up that little part there. So that's good. So now I'm gonna bring this back to full opacity, hit enter to basically come out of that transform session there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a layer mask on this. So I'm gonna click on the layer mask, right? So basically, if the layer mask is white, that means you could see it. If it's black, that means you cannot see it. So I'm gonna go back to my brush tool by hitting B, well, not Command B, but just B brings you back to the brush tool. So I'm gonna bring up my, make my brush tool a little bit bigger. So again, like if it's white, you could see it. If it's black, you don't. So what I wanna do is I wanna get rid of, actually, you know what? I'm gonna make the entire layer mask completely black. Okay, so to do that, I'll hit Command I. So that basically just inverts it, and what it's doing, it's hiding the hair that I duplicated. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use my brush, right? And I'm on the layer mask here, so I'm gonna brush in the area that I wanna cover up, okay? So it's that simple. So to get rid of some parts of it, like this part I wanna get rid of or transition it a little bit better, is you just do black. Basically you are using the black part of the brush to basically get rid of some aspect of it. So now if I do like before, after, so you could see some parts of it here is just not transitioning well. So you gotta clean it up just a little bit. So before, after, before, after. So if I back out, you just try to see if that looks natural. Okay, and it does. All right, so what I do is with that big general cleanup, I will basically group all of these. So I highlight all of them and hit Command G to group it, and I'll give it a name. I'll just call it cleanup. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but I just call it cleanup just so I know what it is. So if I hit before and after, these are all the changes that I made in that group. Okay, so the next one that I want to do is basically I want to do some dodging and burning on her skin. Okay, So I'm going to do that by adding 2 adjustment layers. So I'm going to add the curve, actually 2 curves, okay? And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is on luminosity, so it doesn't impact so it doesn't impact the color basically in the image. All I just want to impact is the lights and the shadows. So by making these layers luminosity, it allows me to do that. So the next thing is, let's give these curves a name. So this one is going to be our dodge layer, right? And this one is going to be our and this one is going to be our burn. Okay, actually let's flip that. Let's put the burn on the top and dodge on the bottom. Okay, so now you would drop, okay, you just drop it down utilizing the curve. So this curve, you want to basically bring down your lights basically. So by dragging the curve down, you're bringing down the lights. Okay, now what you want to do is, just like we did before, hit Command I on the layer mask so you could get rid of that effect, because you don't want that effect to impact the entire image. You only want to impact certain aspect of the image. Now you go to the dodge, and the dodge now is you want to increase the lights. So you're going to push the curve in the opposite direction. Okay. All right. Now, same like before, you're going to hit Command I, so basically to hide that effect and everything. So what I want to do first is put this in the entire group, okay? And then I'm going to call this DMB for dodge and burn, okay? So now I'm going to expand that group again, and now I'm going to go back to my brush, so B for brush. So the first thing I want to do with my brush when I'm using dodging and burning is I want to make sure that I drop my flow to something really, really low. Okay, so around 4 is fine. Okay, and another thing I like to do is and a lot of retouchers do this. I'm not a retoucher per se, but making the image black and white. Okay, so also by making the image black and white, the other thing that you could do is basically drop the reds a little bit and drop the yellows, just to give it a little bit more contrast, so you could see the difference between the light and shadows a little bit more. Okay, now once you do that, now you can begin to dodge and burn the image. Now, because the layer mask is hidden right now, you need to make sure that your brush is on the white side. So let's expand this a little bit. And now, actually, we want to zoom out so we could see what we're doing, because these are overall effects, okay? So right now, like I said, we want to enhance basically the shadows, because the burn part of this dodging and burning is basically to enhance the shadows in the image. We're going to work with the lights in a little bit, but this part right now is to enhance the shadows. So let's brush. And I may fast forward this part as well because this is a little bit boring. So yeah, I'll fast forward. All right, guys, so we basically just finished the burn part of dodging and burning. So let's just take a quick before and after look at that, okay? So this is the before, this is the after, okay? Before, after. And again, all we're doing is basically impacting the lights and shadows in this image. So right now we're just impacting the shadows, and as you can see, that little work that we did was a lot. And all I'm focusing on is the shadow area of this image. Okay, so now we're gonna do the dodge part of it. Now, the dodge, basically, I'm gonna basically doing two things with the dodge. One, I'm gonna basically helping with some of the transition of the shadows and the lights in this image. As you can see, some of the shadows is a little bit too prevalent on this side, so I need to clean that up. So in order to do that, I need to drop my opacity a little bit more. So I'm gonna drop it to the lowest that it could go. And then what I'm gonna go through is basically help the transition here a little bit better. So again, I'm gonna fast forward this because this is a little bit boring, but that's essentially what I'm doing right now. I'm just gonna clear up the transition between the shadows and the lights, okay? All right, so you guys noticed that I kind of jumped around a little bit there. The reason being is because I noticed something was on an arm and I wanted to fix it up, and I basically just utilized the clone stamp, the heal and brush tool to basically fix up those little areas on our arm. And the other thing that I did here was I went to relabel some of these layers, just so you guys know what each one of these layers were being used for, okay? All right, so, and when I was doing that, I took the black and white off of it. But let's go back to the dodge and burn, right? So we were basically clearing up some of the transition on her face. So let's take a look at some of the before. So as you can see, some of that black area here, which is the shadows that was on her face here, is kind of cleared up now because we were just trying to get rid of that. So we were just trying to make sure that the transition nicely. And I could see that's happening, but I noticed that there's an area over here that I would need to fix just a little bit more. So let's just fix this. All right, so you can see that. All right, so we did the cleanup, we did the dodging and burning. So now we're gonna basically try to see if there's anything else that we need to do in this image before we actually get to the color work, okay? So let's just do that really quickly. All right, so I'm looking at this image, and you know, one of the things that I could try to do here is let's look at the histogram, okay? And the reason I try to look at a histogram a little bit is just to make sure that there is nothing being blown out, or there's no shadows, no details being lost in the shadows, and everything seems to be pretty good. So yeah, so I don't need to really do anything there. So that's a good thing. So given that I think we're pretty much done with respect to this image, let's look at her face here a little bit more just to make sure there's nothing else that we're missing. Yeah, I think this image is pretty good. So now let's work on the color work, okay? So what I try to do here is we're gonna add a curve. We're gonna add not a curve, just, I don't know if I'm gonna use it, but we're gonna add it. We're gonna add levels, and we're gonna add a channel mixer, okay? And I'm gonna show you guys how I use all of those, okay? So on the curve, so we're gonna basically change this to luminosity. I like to do that because I don't like when I'm utilizing this layer, which is basically to add some contrast into this image, I don't want to impact the colors. Now there's sometimes I may just leave the layer in normal mode and it would impact the colors as well as the lights, but right now I just want to impact the lights and shadows because I just want to add some contrast into this image. So one thing you want to do here is first of all is you want to get a good black portion in this image, okay? So what I mean by that is because you don't want to crush your shadows, so you got a black point. let's just target her here, okay? Right, so you create that little dot right there just so you know that you're not going to be crushing the shadows beyond this point, okay? So now I'm going to also get a highlight point as well. Let's go right here. And I think I just inadvertently pushed it up. So let's undo that. And that's not what I wanted to do. Undo that. And we're going to get that highlight point right there, okay? So now we have a highlight point. So we're not gonna basically overexpose her face at that highlight point because we want to lock those two things down. So now that we lock it down, now we could basically go and do the contrast. So we're gonna pull down the shadows just a little bit, and then we're gonna increase the highlights just a little bit. Oops, that's a little bit too much. Come back just a little bit more. Okay, so let's just take a look at the before and after. So before and after. So now we added a little bit of contrast to this image. Now, it's always good to basically just pull back your effect when it comes to color work just a little bit, because you never know if you're going overboard with your effects. So you always try to pull it back just a little bit. So that's the contrast, okay? So now the other thing that I try to do is I try to add a little bit of a vignette into the images. Now this one, I'm going to put this into luminosity as well because I don't want to impact the lights and shadows. Like I said, the color, I don't want to impact the color. Now this one is debatable whether or not I'm going to use it. So let's see if I'm going to use it or not, because sometimes it doesn't pay to utilize it doesn't pay sometimes to utilize the vignette. So let me see if I'm going to use it first before I even start explaining what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm not gonna, so I was gonna utilize this layer for a vignette, and right now I don't think I'm gonna do that, so I'm gonna nix that for now. So let's move on to color. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some blues into the shadows. So go to the blue channel, right? Go to blue, and then go into shadows. We basically add in some blues into the shadows, okay? All right. Now, one of the things you could do here is go into apply image. Now, in apply image, what I want to do is I want to apply what I just did only to the shadow areas in this image, okay? So you're gonna go to invert. So invert is gonna basically just do the shadows. So you hit OK, okay? So if you hit so if you hit Alt and you click on the layer mask, you'll see exactly what it did. So it's only impacting the shadow areas of this image. So it's not basically touching her face. It's just wherever it's light, right? That's where it's impacting this image. So that's only the shadow areas of the image. That's the only part that's impacted. So that's all I want this thing to impact. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create another levels. I'm gonna add another levels here. And then I'm gonna go to the blue part as well. And at this point, the opposite of blue is yellow. So I wanna add some yellows into the highlight. So if you go the opposite direction, if you go too far, it's too much yellow. But you just want to add just a little bit of yellow into the image. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go to image, apply image. And this time I'm going to check this off. I want it to impact the highlights, not the shadows. So I'm going to uncheck that. So hit OK on that. Okay, you do it before and after. And again, like I said, you just roll back your effect just a little bit, right? Because you don't want it to go too crazy. Okay. All right. Next, I'm gonna do here is the channel mixer. So on the channel mixer, I want to desaturate the image just a little bit. Okay. So I'll just pick one that basically gives it a little bit of good contrast. So I'll just go through here the what you call it, the presets. Go through the presets. All right, so let's go through the presets here, and I'm just looking to see what gives it a good contrast. So that's like a good bit of contrast there. So what I'm gonna do is reduce my saturation. Okay. So let's reduce it a little bit more. Okay, so basically by reducing the saturation, I'm bringing back the color into the image. Well, I should say by reducing the black and white, which is this layer here, the opacity on that black and white, it just mixes some of the black and white with some of the color below, right? So the color work is all below here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna group all of this, okay? So we'll just look at the before, and this is the after. So before, after, okay? So that's basically the color work. Let's call this color, okay? So we added some color into that, all right? So the one other thing that I need to do here is that I just noticed that I missed is I didn't really add any highlights to her when I was doing the dodging and burning. So let's go back to that really quick, because all I was focused on that was basically to try to do the lights and the shadows, basically to help with that transition. So let's fix that. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to highlight, wherever there's a highlight, I want to basically make sure I want to emphasize it by utilizing the dodge part of this image, okay? So, or this layer I should say, not this image. So we're gonna go in here and just basically highlight wherever we see a highlight, just we're gonna emphasize it just a little bit more, okay? So like on our lips here, let's zoom in so we make sure we do a good job. Okay, and you know, like her nose here as well. So some highlights here, highlights there. Want to emphasize that other highlight in her crease of her eye. So, okay, speaking of eyes, let's just make sure that we emphasize a little bit more of her eyes here. So let's do whites. Put some whites in her eyes. I know that looks horrible, but we're gonna fix that. And let's double click on this. Right, so this bring up that if and blend if option. So we're gonna just basically go like this and go like this, because what we want to do is just impact just the highlights and not the shadows. So this is help targeting just the highlights in her eyes, okay? All right, so look at the before and after on that. So I could see that that impacted some parts of the eye that I didn't, which is like at the below here. So I'm gonna use the erase tool, so E for the erase tool, and basically just erase at the bottom of our eye, because I don't want it to impact the bottom of our eye, okay? So let's label this eye, or eyes. Okay, so if you look at the before and after on that, you could see, let's zoom out. You could see it just adds a little bit of punch to our eyes, which is, you know, subtle, but it's helpful. All right, so that's, oh, I didn't finish the dodge and burn. I got distracted with the eye. So the next thing we could do kind of like the similar thing with the here, okay? So we want to highlight, take some of that highlight that's in our here. So let's go with let's choose this color. Yes, I know that looks horrible, but I'm gonna fix it in a minute. Okay, so now we're gonna do the blend if again, and again we just want to target the highlights, so we're gonna bring that back, bring that back. All right, so you could see some of it got impacted outside. Actually, let's get rid of that. I don't like how that looks, so I'm gonna change my mind. We're gonna do whites. Let's put whites all over her here instead of brown. I think the brown pretty much dulled out what I was trying to go for here. So let's just use white. And you're gonna have to fix this up a little bit, but let's just use white. Okay, so we're gonna do the blend if. Okay, I know that looks bad, but it's gonna get better. Okay. All right, so now all we have to do is use the erase tool and erase this effect from the outside because it affected like the background a little bit. You don't want it to affect the background. And this is a little bit too harsh here. All right, let's bring down the opacity just a little bit. Again, we're just going for subtlety, okay? Not going for anything too crazy, just subtle effects. All right, let's add the color back in there. Okay, so let's take a complete before and after so far. So we go before. So to do the complete before and after, if you hold down the Alt key and you press the background, you could just see the quick before and after. Okay. All right. So now the other thing that I do here is to add a little bit of sharpening to this image. So we're gonna hit Control Alt Shift E, which creates a duplicate layer of everything. And we're gonna hit Control Shift U, which desaturates the image just a little bit because you don't want to impact the color. So we're gonna do Filter, Other, High Pass. And we just want enough of the high pass so you can just see a little bit of a skin texture, which is what you're looking for. You're just looking for a little bit of a skin texture, okay? So I see that. So I'm gonna hit OK. You can increase this a little bit more if you want, the radius, but for me, this is fine. So actually, I don't know if you guys can see this on the YouTube, but hopefully you can, but for me right now, this is good. Actually, you know what? For your benefit, I'm gonna increase it just a little bit, just hopefully so you guys can see it. Okay, so I'm putting this up to 2.5, which is a little bit too much because you could see some of the haloing happening, which I don't like. I'm gonna drop that down just back to 1.9, okay? So I hit OK on that, and then to bring this back to normal, you just bring it to overlay. Okay, you change that that layer to overlay. Now, two things. I'm gonna create two sharpening layers because this layer that I created here, I want to impact just the eyes a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the layer mask on this, right? And right now, because it's black, it's not impacting any of the image. So in order for me to impact the image, I need to utilize my brush, and I'm gonna brush over her eyes specifically on this layer because I just want to impact the layer. This particular layer, I just wanted to impact her eyes only, okay? And the reason I want to impact her eyes only is because I want to draw more attention to her eyes when people are looking at it, okay? All right, so now we're gonna do another layer. So we do Control Alt Shift E again, Control Shift U to desaturate the image, and then we do high pass because that's what we just did, so we could just click on it again. Then we do overlay. Okay, and then I drop this opacity down to, let's say, 30. Or actually, I'll drop it to, let's say, 25, because I will sharpen this image again. And I'll show you guys that in a minute. Okay, so that's it. So this is our sharpen layer here. Okay, so let's do a complete before and after again. Before, after, before, after. Okay, so what else can we do to this image, if anything? What else is missing is what I generally say to myself. And I think so far this image is looking good. And a good practice also is, you know, to walk away and come back and, you know, see what else needs to be fixed on the image. I think your eyes get adjusted a little bit better once you walk away from the image and come back, just to make sure that there's nothing else that needs to be done to the image. But I think for me right now, I think this is fairly good. The other thing I could try to do with this image is, so this was the shadow area. Let's just label that really quick. I'm gonna try something really quick to see if it works. And this is the highlight. Let's take this in a different direction really quickly here. I just want to see if this works. So let's do a solid color. Now I do have some swatches, I think 2 swatches. This one here, I really like this. So this is the shadow area, solid color for the shadow area. And we're gonna do a, actually before we do that, we're gonna put this over as soft light. Okay, and then we're gonna make this, right now we wanna just impact the shadows. So we're gonna go the opposite direction. So this was the highlights, and we're gonna go and take this off of, I'm sorry, this was the shadows, this is the highlights. So we want to take this off of the highlights, okay? We just want to leave this in the shadow parts of the image. So basically what we're doing here is taking that effect off of the highlights. So let's reduce this effect just down a little bit, all right? Because that's a little bit too much. Now let's introduce again the shadow that we had before. So we have a mixture now of the green and the blue in the shadow area of this image, and then we have the highlights. Okay, so I kind of like that little mixture of the green tone in this image. Yeah, I think that gives it a nice sort of feel to it. Okay, kind of like that a little bit. Now again, like I said, you review, analyze, and figure out what else you need to do. But I think for the most part, I think I'm done. I think for this image, I'm done. So what we're gonna do here is, I'm just gonna make it full screen. And basically, this is our image. This is the final retouched image. I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you very much. All right guys, so that's it. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. If you guys want to see a full in-depth retouching tutorial that I did, that's over 3 hours long, and it covers several different images, then I'll put that link down below so you guys can go ahead and check it out. It comes with some free actions that you guys could download if you purchase the tutorial. And it also comes with the images that you could basically follow along and, you know, retouch the images along with me. So if you wanted to support the channel and support what I'm doing, please go ahead and check out that video and rent it or buy it if you would like. Again, I do hope this was helpful though. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Put some comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if it was helpful to you. And let me know how you guys go about editing your images. Now, please also share this video with your friends and family if you think it was helpful. And lastly, guys, if you got this far in the video and you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to the channel. and I will see you guys on the next video.